Hello, Dave here. Welcome to Learn JavaScript with me. In this video, we're going to use this silly little page to demonstrate three Ajax features. One, we're going to make it a synchronous Ajax request, which means we're going to wait for this request to be finished before we move on. And the idea is just to show how that happens. Not a great real-world example, but the idea is if we don't have anything to show the visitor, then we have nothing to do there. But anyway, the idea is that you can make synchronous and asynchronous Ajax requests. The second item is that we're going to use the get method as opposed to the post. And what that means is we're going to pass any data that we need to pass back and forth, that we need to pass to the PHP script. We're going to pass that in the URL, common for like a search, sending, I want you to search for A, B, C, D, whatever it is that you put in the search column there. I want to search for, vacations in the Bahamas. And finally, we're going to get the data back from the PHP script in XML format. So just to see how it looks, here's the initial page. I'll just hit refresh up here. I hit refresh. Here's the this text is actually in the HTML. I hit get next page. This data it got from the Ajax request. It's in the PHP file, and it was returned in XML format. And I'll go get the second page, and it's just dummy text. And now the third page, and since it's the third and final page, we remove the link here at the bottom of the screen. This is the fourth Ajax exercise out of 5. It is from Chapter 11. The book is Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design. It was written by Larry Ullman. You can get more information at larryullman.com. I have a link for it. Anyway, so here's the book cover. If you go to davecoast.com, I have on the nav bar learning JavaScript. That takes us to all these exercises. That's where this is, js.davecoast.com. And here's the global post out here, another link to js.davecoast.com, a link to larryullman.com in case you're interested in more information about the book. I have no relationship to Larry or his book, except that I'm using it. And here's all the code that I have so far. I think I have about 35 exercises, and all the code that I've used is downloadable at this link. And finally, here's a playlist with the videos. As of this point, there's 29 of them, and we're recording video 30 within this JavaScript series. So once again, davecoast.com, and you can contact me out there, dave@davecoast.com. Let's go ahead and get into the exercise. I'll come back over here, and there is a little bit of a not very pretty nav bar up on top, but can go back to Dave Coast. From there, can come back, js.davecoast.com. You're welcome to come out here and place these exercises in debug, or use Firebug if you're in Firefox, and enjoy. This is the fourth exercise, the one that we're working on today. So Ajax 4, synchronous Ajax with the get. Here's that screen that we just saw. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the code behind the scenes. There are 4 files involved. We have 2 JavaScript files. The first one is an external function that creates our XML HTTP request also known as XHR object. We need that object. Then we have our main JavaScript file, and this does most of the work. Notice for this specific example, everything is done within the window.onload anonymous function, and we're going to walk through every line of that code in a couple of moments. Here's the HTML that I'm using, and most of it fluffy, fluffy, fluffy. But down here is the actual code, right? This is the HTML for this screen here. And let me blop this window back in place. So here's our, here's that initial text that is out there. That's just hard-coded here for the very first page. And here's our link, and it can be anything there. And down at the bottom, here's where we bring in the two JavaScript files. The create Ajax object has to be first because it is used by the Ch11 content.js file. And finally, we have our PHP file, rounds out our 4 files that we use. This file is going to go ahead and set up. It's going to pass back XML data, and it's just basically echo statements, but it is sending it back all within tags. See, there's an item tag there. There is title tag, content tag, title tag, content tag, right? First page, second page, third page, nothing fancy. And again, this is, you know, we're learning JavaScript, so we're not spending any time or getting fancy in the PHP side of things. Not that I could, but either way, and we're also using the get method in here. And this get associative array, right? We only have one index value of it, but this index value is the data that we're passing in the URL, and it gets placed in the get associative array and is available in the PHP file. We'll take a quick look at the main JavaScript file here, and then we'll walk through in detail in Firebug to see what is actually happening. But here's the main JavaScript file, and we're starting with the window.onload. Normally things start at the bottom, but I guess this is the bottom. Everything being done. There's no name here of this function, so it's an anonymous function. Everything done in this one anonymous function at window onload. First thing we do is we create a variable, and this is just an array of first page, second page, third page. Notice that those values there match up here with our switch case, first page, second page, third page. Okay, so that's how that works together. And then we create a counter so we can loop through this array. Then we actually create the Ajax object by executing this function. This function is available to us because of this file here. Here is the named function. Here's its name, which is equal to this name. So we execute this. If it's anything but an older version of IE, it creates a new object, and it is called XML HTTP request, XHR. Otherwise, if it's older IE, it's an ActiveX object, and it has to have this argument to create it. Once it's created, all of the properties and methods are the same for either object. So it doesn't really matter. And then we return that object to wherever this was called. This name doesn't matter. It's returning the object. It's just, this is what we call it within this individual scope of this named function. So going back to content.js, we created ourselves an Ajax object. Then we go ahead and do the Ajax open method, which sets things up. We say we're going to use the get method, which passes data in the URL. Well, the next argument is the URL, and notice that we pass after the actual file name, content.php, right? That's this file name here. After that file name, right, path file name, we have a question mark which says we're sending data. Then we have this field here where this text there with an equal sign, well, that's going to be the index of the get, the $_get associative array. So coming back here, equal, and then we put together, whoops, right through there, right, the page array work, counter work. So counter is equal to 0. And when that's equal to 0, we're going to pass it first page. So out here, it's going to, case will be first page, and it's going to return this data here, which is the first page information. And that's because we're still at the very first time through this loop. So we bop through there, we set up, and then we say false here as the third argument. And that says go ahead and wait for the request to complete. And that's what makes it a synchronous request. Down here, we actually say execute my Ajax request, right? This says this is what I want my Ajax request to be. And this says go ahead and actually do it. We pass no here because we are using get and passing the data as part of the URL. If this was a post and we needed to pass data, we would pass that data here. Then we go ahead and utilize the response XML, right? And you'll notice out here in the PHP file, we are returning XML as our content type, and that's why we start out with all this. This is how an XML file needs to be returned. So it's in our response XML, and we'll go ahead and see this better in debugger, but in order to get the actual data, it's the Ajax object, the response XML, we get elements by tag name, and here's our element title tag. Notice out here we have title tag. We're going to get the, it is an array. Get elements by tag name always returns an array. So we're getting an array. There's only one entry here, so we're going to get the very first array element, which is index 0. Then we have to go to its first child, and in its first child, which is the text node, we'll actually pick up the node value, which is the actual text. So that's in between these tags here. That's title tag or content tag. This text is part of a text node, which is the first child of the title tag element. And that's the transversing of the XML data that's returned. Then we basically create an event listener on the link out on the page, and when that link is clicked, we run through our code. So the first thing we do is put the preloaded code out to the page, simple inner HTML, right? And we have our two values here, right? We created them up here and got the values from our response XML, so they're preloaded. We put those out on the page, then we bump up the counter, we check and make sure that all 3 pages have not been done, and then we go through basically the same Ajax steps to preload the next page if there is a next page. Obviously, if the counter is not equal to 3. And we return false so that we don't follow that link because we intercepted that link with the JavaScript. Now we'll go ahead and walk through this in Firebug to reinforce what's happening, to see what's actually going on. So we'll come back out here. Here's our page. I'm going to go ahead and start from scratch here. Let me go out to Chapter 11 exercises, Ajax 4, our initial page. I'm going to turn on Firebug. Let's detach that so I can just zoom in, make it a little easier to see what's happening here. I'll hit reload. Notice that we already have, look at that, an XML XHR request has happened, right? If I come over here to the net, XHR, here's that request. Well, that's because it does that preload, and we'll see why that happens. Anyway, let's go back to script view here, and I'm going to go ahead, select my content.js from Chapter 11, and I'm going to go ahead and set a breakpoint at the first executable statement within the window.onload function, and I'll set a breakpoint on the onClick function for the link on the page. And that way we'll be able to see what's going on. Here's our actual page. Let me refresh that. So we start at window.onload. Here's our window.onload, right? We refresh, the page has been loaded. And I will go ahead. We see our first statement is create this page array work. Let's step through and see what's happening. So I hit step. I created this array with our 3 pages. So this is just goofy example stuff for our 3 pages. Nothing fancy happening there. Just created an array and gave it page 1, page 2, and page 3. Now we'll create a counter. So now we have a counter, and its value is 0. Now we're going to create our Ajax object. And notice that we bopped over to this other JavaScript file, and we're going to create the object. So we create a variable, set it to null. Now, if XML HTTP request is available, which means that this is a browser that supports XML HTTP requests, then we'll actually use it and create it, which is true for Firefox. Otherwise, it's older IE, or if it is older IE and it uses an ActiveX object, we'll create that variable. Right? Just went through that, and now I'm going to return. Notice the green XML HTTP request object. That's what we're going to return to our program here. And I hit enter, and now we see that my variable Ajax object has that XML HTTP request object. Now we're going to go ahead and do our setup of our request. And notice counter work is 0, so page array work having those 3 values, well, quote, first page there is index 0. And we can see that here. Here's page array work. And index 0 is equal to first page. That's what is happening here. Counter work equal to 0. Let's keep stepping. Right now we're going to actually execute it. We set it up. Here's that Ajax setup, get, first page, and false for synchronous. Now we're going to actually execute. So we just executed it. And notice that we now have our get response information. And we can see it either down here, and I just have the console here, right? Just the console. You can also get to it over here at the net. Here's everything. Or just look at our XHR to bring it up. And if I take a look at it, notice that it's got parameters. Oh, here's that get this data. And that's why I'm leaving it down here. It's just easier to see both at the same time. But here's that get this data. This is where we defined it. So in here, get this data is equal to first page. Oh, first page makes sense. Here's the headers, and here's our response. We're getting text back, XML, and here's where we sent out. That's our request header. And here's our response. Here's all that response XML. You'll notice that this is what came from the PHP file. And here's it. So here's the response, setting up the XML, and here's the actual XML response. Tag, 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 right? With first page title, getting started. So that's what we're getting back. And that's our Ajax get request. So now let's go ahead and notice, ooh, look at that goofy statement. Let me go ahead and execute it. So once I've executed this thing, notice it's variable title work. It's equal to the first page title, right? So that it extracted from here, the first page title within title tag. And it did that because we're looking at the Ajax object. It's response XML. Oh, response XML. There's the response XML, right? Get elements by tag name, content tag. Well, we actually executed this one up here, title. So this is title tag. Title tag right here. And by tag name, title tag. Ooh, then it says index of 0. So it's the first one. Remember, get elements by tag name always returns an array, even if there's only one entry. So there's only one entry, and it's index 0, but we still have to index it because it is an array. Then its first child, and the first child is the text node, and its node value is the actual text. And that's how we actually get to this first page title. So I know that's kind of goofy, but that's what's happening here. And that is us transversing the DOM. So now we have this, the actual text, and the title work. And to see how all that happened, if we look at our Ajax object over here, right? So here's our Ajax object. Here's our response XML. Here's our child nodes. There's our item tag. I know this is kind of goofy, but anyway, here's the children under there. And notice we have title tag and content tag. Looking at title tag. And its first child is this text node. So that's its first child is that text node, and its node value is the first title page. Anyway, I know, kind of goofy. Didn't mean to drag you through all that, but that's the beauty of the DOM. That's our object. That's all the stuff that's buried in there, and that's getting that XML back. Let me get back on track here. Hopefully not putting you asleep too much there. But this is the meat of the puzzle here, is actually transversing all of these values there. So once again, we have our Ajax object. We have a response XML. We do a get elements by tag name. We give it the tag name, right? So it's a little hard-coded. We need to get the very first index of that array. So that value is 0. Its first child is the text node, and we want the actual node value, which is the actual text within that XML element. Okay, so I hit enter, or I step again to the next one, and we created this variable next work link, which is creating a reference to the link on the page. Then we create an event listener for the on-click. I hit the next statement. We finish up, and now we're ready, right, to get the next page. Notice when I say get the next page, it hasn't shown us that first page yet, but that is preloaded. So when I click this link here, right, it's going to go ahead and actually see title work and content work. It's going to put that first page that has been preloaded actually on the page. So let's step through those two. And you see that these two values from the PHP script are now out on the page. Let me bring back the Firebug. Then we bump up the counter. And this is all pretty standard stuff. We basically do the same Ajax steps here, only we don't recreate the variable here. And now we do the setup, but now counter work is equal to 1, right? We bumped up the counter here. So now we're going to go to second page instead of first page, now that we're bumping up that counter, and we're using this page array work and counter work. So let me go ahead, step. We actually execute the Ajax request. We have those values. We transverse them like we did before. Get title work and content work, and now we're equal to the second page. And the second page content, doesn't matter what it is. And we are done. Up here in the .NET, you'll see that we have 2 requests. Here was our first one. And this one got us the first page. XML. Here's the second one. And XML. I guess it doesn't show it the same way after it gets the second one here, but here's the second page information. Could have easily, let me go back to script, could have just as easily looked at it down here in the console. Firebug, what a lovely thing. And if we zip out here, we see that it's still showing the first page, but the second page is loaded. And then I can hit the link to go to the second page. Let me get rid of the breakpoints out here. And I'll hit continue. And it shows us the second page. And then I hit the third page, and it removes that link at the bottom. Bring up the code up here. You'll see that when it does equal 3, counter work is equal to 3, it does a remove child here to get rid of that link, because we have all 3 pages showing out there. So I'm going to reattach my Firebug to the bottom, turn it off. Here's our page. So if I refresh one more time just for the fun of it, here's the text from the HTML. Here's the XML text from the PHP script, page 1, page 2, page 3, link removed, end of what we're trying to learn here. And you'll see that here's our first page, second page, third page. And we're using the get. And here's that get this data. Once again, everything is available out here at davecoast.com. You come out to learning script here, which is js.davecoast.com. Debug away and learn the concepts. We did a synchronous Ajax, which seems kind of like an oxymoron if you believe that the A in Ajax stands for asynchronous. But either way, we did a synchronous Ajax request to preload this page information, and we also parsed out XML data on the return. This is Dave at davecoast.com. Let me know any questions or comments on the video or send me a message. Thank you very much for watching.